Okay, so let's go back, and as we make our changes, let's make them to our CSS as well. So I'll refresh the page to clear out the CSS that we were playing with. And now the first thing that we did was we set the width of this container element to 100%. So now where do we put this style? We're working with this stacked hero section alt, and it seems reasonable that this alternative theme that we created to have this gray background with the white border would also have this property where it would be 100% wide. So let's add that width to our subcomponent. So I'll go back to our code, into the stacked hero section partial, and let's stick this here in the alt. Set the width to 100%, and I'll go back to the browser. And now the next step is setting the width of this slideshow. So I'll inspect this element, and I'm going to go up to the point where we get to our flex slider snippet slideshow class. And this one, we're going to set the width to 960 pixels and the margin right and margin left to auto. So let's see about adding these styles to our snippet slideshow class. I'm going to do a quick search for snippet slideshow, the text, across all of the files in our project here to see where we had this class. So it's right here in our snippet slideshow partial. And I think we'll go ahead and add our styles here. If we discover later that there's a better way to organize these styles to make this slideshow more flexible, because we'll need it in other places, we can adjust the styles and make them more portable. So we're going to set the width to 960 pixels, the margin left to auto, and the margin right to auto. Now, we've used this 960 pixels in a few different places, and I'm thinking it's about time that we pull it out into a variable that can be used across all of our partials. Let's save this really quick and jump back to the browser and refresh. Okay, so we're getting what we need here. Let's pull this 960 pixels out to a variable. So I'm going to open up our variables partial, and I'm going to add a new section down here for layout. And I'm going to call this variable max width. Now I'm going to leave it as a number so we can more easily do calculations with it. So we'll set the max width here to 960 pixels, and let's adjust this wherever we're using it. So I'll do a quick search across my entire project for 960 px. In PHP Storm, I could pull up that dialog by holding Command-Shift-F, but you can also use a command line tool called grep in order to search for particular content across an entire folder. And here we have layout.scss. We're using 960. So I'll replace this with our max width variable. And then also in our snippet slideshow, which we've been working on. So I'll replace that here with max width. I'll save this all and refresh in the browser. Okay, looks good. So this squares us away for the large version of our site. But then once we get to a certain point here, it gets a little too small. So that'll be at about 1070 pixels. So let's add a breakpoint for that. So I'll add a variable here within the context of this rule, so it's not a global variable, and let's call it breakpoint single item. And now let's add a breakpoint to these styles. We're going to adjust the width so that it's the width of a single item. So we'll do include and then breakpoint. And now the way that we're thinking about this is what happens as we make our browser smaller, which corresponds to the max width rather than the min width media query. If we were looking at smaller and then what happens as we get bigger, we'd be thinking along the mid-width idea. So let's start by using max width, and then we'll come back and convert it back to min width, because as we established in earlier videos, it makes sense to code with mobile first in mind, even if we're designing the opposite direction. So once we get to this breakpoint, what we'll do is add max width, and then our variable breakpoint single item, and then we'll adjust the styles here. So we're going to set the width now to the size of a single item, which, if we go back to our index, is going to be 515 pixels. Now, it would be nice to be able to use the same number here and the same number here as a variable, but given what we have so far, we can't really do that. This variable here in our index.html file is being used in some JavaScript, and then we're using a variable here in our Sass. Now, as we get into automation tools, we could actually use the same variable in both places, but right now we're kind of stuck. So let's just set the width here to 515 pixels, and we can come back later and adjust this, but let's add a quick to-do. So I'll just add the text, share this value with slideshow.js as a variable. Okay, let's save this, go back to the browser and refresh. And then as we get smaller, we should see at a certain breakpoint right here that we bump to displaying just a single snippet. So nice.